Cool. Hi, everyone. Um, my name's Teddy. I'm a student at Brown University. I'm a sophomore. I'm also an SAT tutor. I've been tutoring for the SAT for about 3 years now. I started on the paper SAT back when it was on paper a few years ago, and then they switched to the digital SAT. Um, and they changed a lot on the digital SAT. They changed the math section to give you access to a calculator on all of it, rather than having separate calculator and no calculator sections. Now there's you get a full graphing calculator, a digital one on everything. But what they changed even more was the reading section. They changed it from these long passages, which you would then read and then have to answer like 5 questions sequentially about, to just having one short passage, one question, another short passage, another question relating to that passage. So really just having one question per passage. And that helps a lot with not making you test sort of your reading comprehension less, and sort of making you test the skills that you've learned to develop for the SAT more. The change really emphasized the style of the test the SAT is. It now matters even more so than it did before, that you really understand the test and understand what they're looking for when they ask you a question. And one of my favorite ways to practice both the math section and the reading and writing section, but today we're going to be talking about the reading and the writing section, is MEELA. And MEELA is a tool that utilizes a lot of special features that you can't really find anywhere else, to help optimize and actually like sort of gamify and really make you enjoy your studying for the test. And I want to show you that today. So this is MEELA. It's currently a web application. Uh, and the URL is app.trymeela.com, and I'm going to help you guys get there at the end. But I want to show you the reading and writing section. So if we go here and we're on MEELA, you'll see we have 3 modes. We have tutor mode, we have the daily quest mode, and we have boss mode. Now, a brief overview of these modes. Tutor mode is the main mode we're going to be using today. And when you're learning how to take the SAT and how to improve your score, that's the mode you're going to be using. And it's really an option for you to focus on what you need to know. MEELA actually helps figure out what you need to know, what you're struggling with, and you have MEELA there to support you the entire time. You also have a daily quest every day. The daily quest is really useful if you know you're in the car or something, or you're on a road trip, or you're taking a train to your internship or something, and you want to just do a few questions to get your SAT practice in for the day. Because really the best way to practice for the SAT is to do at least 5 to 10 questions every day. So the daily quest is great for that. And then finally, you have boss mode. Boss mode is simulating the actual test on MEELA. So it's in a familiar place, but it's the actual content that you're going to see on test day. And you're given a time limit too. So it's able to like basically effectively perfectly simulate the exact circumstances you're going to be under, besides obviously the location and the timing and everything, when you take the SAT on test day. But I want to look at tutor mode with you. So when we look at tutor mode, notice we have 4 topics here. And if you don't know, these 4 topics are the sort of 4 keystones of the SAT verbal section, right? We have information and ideas. That's our first topic. That's dealing with, if a question asks you about, it gives you a passage and says, which of the following best describes the main idea of the passage? That's an information and ideas question. We also have craft and structure. That's sort of transitions, like like if you're given like this blank this, and you're asked what transition best completes the sentence. That's a craft and structure section question. These questions tend to be pretty difficult because they require a pretty intricate understanding of both the English language and how the SAT thinks specifically. The SAT is the type of test where it's not that one answer is correct and the other answers are not as correct. It's that one answer is correct and the other answers are completely and utterly incorrect. And that's a really important thing to know if you want to do well on the test. So that's craft and structure. Expression of ideas, sort of similar to information ideas, different in the fact that at the end of if you've taken a practice SAT before, you've seen the questions where you're told that a student wants to write a sentence on the following topic, and you're given a bunch of bullet points, and then you're given 4 sentence options, and the question asks which of the following sentence best achieves the student's goal. That's expression of ideas. It's how can you have some ideas and how good you are expressing them. Then finally, you have standard English conventions. That's sort of the grammar that everyone, I mean, you can probably guess what that's about, right? We have punctuation, and stuff like that, independent clauses, dependent clauses, when you have to join them and whatnot. We have some other features here. If you don't know, internally, you don't get to see it on test day, but internally, every SAT question is rated has a difficulty rating on a scale from 1 to 7. 1 being the easiest, 7 being the hardest. In the SAT's public database, they also do have public ratings where they sort of reduce that from a 1 to 7 scale to a 1 to 3 scale, where 1 and 2 roughly correspond to 1, 2, 3, 4 roughly correspond to 2, and 5, 6, 7 roughly correspond to 3. So they sort of pack down the difficulty scale in the public database. But MEELA does have access to those actual difficulty levels. And you can choose those difficulty levels. So let's say you're not very familiar with information and ideas. A great way to start would be to do information ideas and click easy. Maybe we're not so familiar with standard English conventions. Well, let's do that right now. Let's try some standard English conventions. And let's do just a few questions. Let's start with, let's say, 5 questions. And you can also do a timer if you want, which is great if you want to simulate sort of a test environment, but don't want to go into boss mode where you take the actual test. Okay, so let's start with this. So when we click save, we get sort of a deck of cards, which is the whole style of MEELA, and we're given some questions. And I'd love to go through these questions with you guys. So I'll give you guys about 30 seconds to a minute to read this question. Think of an answer. If you have an answer, please put it in the chat. And if you want to, if any of you wants to unmute, wait for everyone to answer, but if anyone wants to unmute and explain their answer, we can do so. But I'll give you guys about 30 seconds to read it, and I'll do that as well. All right, I'm getting a lot of A's in the chat. Would anyone like to volunteer to explain why they said A? Feel free to just unmute. No worries if not. Okay, well, it seems like everyone agrees on A. And yeah, A is going to be the correct answer here. The reason for that has to do with the grammatical tense we're in, right? If we look at the context here is very important. We're at the first sentence here, and we get asked a question, and then scientists blank that the secret to Roman's durability was its unique blend of ingredients. Let's try it and see how let's try the other answers. Let's say we went with B. Scientists having explained. This suddenly puts us in past tense, but we're in present tense. Explaining, this is the present progressive form of the verb, and we're not in the progressive tense. And to explain is the infinitive. I think just with the natural ear, you can also figure this out. That explain is really the only one that even sounds remotely right, which is probably why this is considered an easy question, right? There's not too much, you don't have to know too many intricacies of the grammar rules, but we get it right. Let's go for another one. I'll give you guys another 30 seconds. All right, I see some D's and some A's. Mark, you said D. Why did you say D? Did you explain your reasoning to us if you're comfortable unmuting? Okay. Okay. Mark said he chose D because allows is plural. Interesting. Okay, Jessica, you said A. Why did you say A? Oh, you said spaces is plural. Okay. Jessica, do you want to tell us why you said A? She's typing. It just sounds. Hey, I mean that's a fair strategy. It'll work for a lot of the questions. A is actually the correct answer. And Mark made a mistake that a lot of people are going to mistake here or are going to make here because he has the right idea of like determining if the subject of the sentence is plural or not, and that determines if you need to add an S at the end. The issue is The subject of the sentence is not spaces. Um, what do you guys think the subject of the sentence is? It's kind of tricky. What's the subject of this sentence? The second sentence that we're looking at. I'll give you a hint. It's not spaces. Angela said landing on one of the good spaces. Yeah, it's a prepositional phrase. Um, Jessica said path. It's not path because path is actually in a separate clause, right? This semicolon is gonna split the sentence in two. Um, Landing on one of the good spaces is actually the subject of this sentence. You could also just consider it landing. Um, we could say landing is the subject. We could also say landing on one of the good spaces. The key idea here is that this is a singular subject, right? Landing. We're not talking about landings. We're talking about landing. And this is a sort of I believe this is called a gerund. I don't remember the exact term, but this is a type of sentence where our subject is actually the infinitive form of a verb. And you don't need to know all the lingo. You just need to know that the landing does not have an S after it, which means we're going to use the singular form of the conjugation, which means we're not going to do allow, we're going to do allows. Allows is going to be the correct answer. Now let's say you got it wrong. Let's say we thought the answer was allow because we mistook the subject of the sentence or something. When we get a question wrong, when we click check, MEELA is going to explain that we got it wrong, but it's gonna be very friendly. It's going to say, "Don't worry, let's learn from this." And this is where it gets special. So if we click on explain, we're actually brought to a separate chat window with MEELA, where MEELA fully explains the answer for us. And let's see how MEELA explains it. Of course, in this question, the subject landing is singular, so it needs a singular verb to match, which is allows in choice A. Choice D, allow, is plural and doesn't agree with the singular subject. So the correct answer is A, to maintain subject-verb agreement. And if let's say that doesn't make sense, what you can do is you can say, why is landing the I cannot see what I'm typing. Um, why is landing the subject? I hope, yeah, there we go. And MEELA actually explains it further to us. So not only can you learn why you got the questions wrong, you can take that opportunity to give yourself a complete personal lesson on the exact complexity you got wrong. In the sentence, landing on one of the good phrases, the phrase landing on one of the good spaces acts as a gerund phrase, right? Gerund. Where landing functions as the subject of the sentence. Gerunds are verbs that act as nouns. So in this case, landing is the subject that requires a singular verb to match, which is allows in choice A. Now let's say, okay, we know what gerunds are. That makes sense. Here's another cool feature of MEELA. Let's say we want to try a question that tests the same concept, but obviously we don't want the exact same question, right? Because that would be too easy. We just memorize the answer. So we're going to try similar. And MEELA generates a question for us that's relatively similar to the first. So I'll give you guys 30 seconds for this. This is a vocabulary and context question. So you're going to have to know what these words mean. And if you can't, I'd encourage you to read through the passage and see if you can determine the meaning from the context in the passage. We'll give you guys 30 seconds. I'm seeing a lot of A's. I think you guys are right. I think the answer is going to be serene, right? And this question ultimately comes down to understanding what the passage is describing and understanding the words. Chaotic. Well, our key words here are respect, harmony, tranquility. Um, doesn't sound chaotic at all. Energetic. I guess there is a philosophical argument to be made that tranquility can also be some sort of energetic, but I don't think we're going that deep here. And mysterious. This is an example of of an option where you think maybe it should work, but there's a better option because there is. Mysterious is completely wrong because we're, there's no indication at all in the passage that this should be a mysterious thing, right? We're told it's a hospitable symbol, it's a symbol of friendship, but nothing about mysteriousness. So Serena is the correct answer. And we could keep trying similar questions if we wanted. We could also go on to the next question. All right, let's try this one. We have another grammar one. I'll give you guys 30 seconds. I'm seeing a lot of D's. Does anyone disagree? If you disagree, I'd love to hear your reasoning. I do think D is the correct answer. Um, and just briefly why that's the correct answer. Um, well, if we look at A, the best way to solve these fill in the blanks questions is to, first of all, just see if it sounds right. Sort of like Angela, or wait, who said that? Jessica had the strategy where if it sounds right, it's probably not a bad choice. And that's going to work for a lot of the questions. The really tricky ones, it's not going to work. Um, but fortunately, if you're not trying to get a perfect score, you have a little bit of room to mess up, which is good. So if we say how they are able to move so fast, that doesn't even sound really like proper English, right? How they are able to. That sounds sort of like broken English. So that's we can eliminate that. How are they able to move so fast? The issue here is that the grammar, the sentence structure is correct, but the punctuation is wrong, right? We're asking a question but ending it with a period. That doesn't make sense, right? We want our vocal inflection to go up at the end. We don't want to say how they are able to move so fast. We want to say how are they able to move so fast? Um, Option C, how they are able to move so fast. Again, we realize the sentence structure with they are doesn't really make sense because we have how before a conjunction. Um, and then we arrive at D, which is option B, but with a question mark at the end, which fixes the issue. And we get the right answer. All right, and you could go on, right? We could go to these further questions. You're also always able to skip a question. So let's say we had no clue what was going on here, we would skip it. You can also get a hint. So let's say I had no idea how to do this question. Consider the rules of grammar and syntax. And yeah, I mean, there isn't there isn't much you can do in this question without giving the answer away. But MEELA tells us, ensure the sentence maintains logical meaning and flow. And when you practice the math section with MEELA, the hints are going to be a little bit more concrete. With the reading section, it's hard to give away much without fully giving away the answer. So it's a little bit hard to give away meaning. But yeah, all right. So we're going to go on to another subtopic. So I'm going to go to tutor mode again. Um, what subtopic do you guys want to go over this time? We'll do a little vote in the chat, just put information, ideas, craft and structure, expression of ideas, or standard English conventions. We can also mix them. So if there's multiple popular ones, we'll go over those. Anyone have any requests? Mix. I'm seeing mix. Mix. All right, let's do a mix. And we can also do a mix of difficulty levels. So now we're going to sort of be in free-for-all mode, which is just what we're going to see on the test. And you know what? Let's even be wild. Let's enable a timer for let's go for 8 minutes. Okay. All right. So and you can also see the difficulty of these questions on the card, which is nice. To be clear, you're not going to get that on the tests. If you saw the difficulty of the question on the test, it'd be a little bit like you'd have a little bit of an advantage because you know that maybe if you saw a hard question and you solved it really fast, you might be missing something. But MEELA, because you're in tutor mode, does give you the difficulty of the questions. So 30 seconds for this one. We have our timer up here. Seeing a lot of C's. All right. Would anyone like to be a volunteer and explain to me why the answer is not A? Because that's something that a lot of people would guess here. And C is the correct answer. But who knows why the answer is not A? They're comparing information. Great. Yeah. Ayushi is exactly correct. The key thing you have to realize here is you have to read a little bit deeper than normally, and you have to realize that the first sentence is a complete contradiction of the second sentence, right? The information is conflicting. It's just a key word here. This is conflicting information, which means one does not follow from the other. We're not thinking about like a box and an arrow pointing to the next box. We're thinking about two boxes and an arrow in between them. So the word we use for that is however, right? This is true, but this is also true. Uh, you know who else can explain that to us is MEELA. So I can ask explain, and I can say, why is the answer not A? As a result is not the correct answer because it would imply that the theory presented in the sentence is a direct consequence or outcome from the previously discussed theory. Just like we said, right? As a result implies one follows from the other, but you have to really comprehend the passage to realize that one does not follow from the other. Okay, now we've got a medium question. This one's a long one. Do we want to do this one? I think we'll, I mean, yeah, okay, we'll do this one. I'll give you guys a minute though, maybe even longer. This is an involved question. Once you have an answer, just say it in the chat. Getting some C's. Yeah, I think C is going to be the right answer here. Let's see. We're correct. Does anyone want to explain why it's not D? D is sort of what we call a trap answer. Because if A is pretty, if you understand what's going on, A is pretty clearly false, right? Only a small number of midges were found in the traps, though the majority were found in the trap that played calls and released carbon dioxide. Remember, the researchers' whole hypothesis here is that carbon dioxide is less effective in getting them. So if more are found when carbon dioxide is released, that's contrary to the researchers' conclusion. And we're trying to find the statement that would most directly support the research conclusion. So that's incorrect. If we look at B, um, B also is basically saying that carbon dioxide is more effective than calls, and like only it's saying only during or immediately after periods of carbon dioxide release. That's in complete contrary to the researcher's conclusion. So A and B are pretty clearly wrong. The trap here is D. The trap that released carbon dioxide and played calls attracted few midges when carbon dioxide concentrations were low, but attracted many midges when carbon dioxide concentrations were high. Why is that wrong? It is actually saying something very similar, which is that when carbon dioxide midges when carbon dioxide concentrations are low, there's very few midges, but when they're high, there's a lot of midges. This is kind of saying something in between the hypothesis and the conclusion, which is that the concentration of the carbon dioxide actually matters. And they're trying to basically trip you up by giving you a bunch of new information that doesn't actually matter indeed. And it's important to be able to differentiate that. And so our answers, let's see. Again, questions like this are always hard, and hence why I give you more time for it. Okay, now we have a sort of literature question. I'll give you guys a minute or so for this one. What do we think? You can see our timer's running out. We'll see if we get cut off when the timer ends. This is a tricky one, right? The English is older. There's a lot of context you have to know. The key thing here is there has to be concern for what's happening at her home in Seattle while she's away. The only one that actually provides that is C, which is why that's the correct answer. And so with these like sort of literature questions, you should often look for a specific thing, and that specific thing is usually only going to be in one of the answer choices. So what I did here when I was looking at this question is I said, I need concern about what's happening at her home. And this timer is about to run out. But we can see we got all the questions we did right. Maybe we didn't finish all the ones we intended to, but obviously we weren't going to finish 15 questions in that short amount of time. But yeah, you can do a rematch, which is actually where you get a basically similar style setup of questions. And yeah, so does anyone have any questions about MEELA or about how best to use this tool? You're welcome to message me if you do. I'm gonna put the link to MEELA in the chat here. And we had Shadri give her LinkedIn. So the website is trymeela.com. The great thing about MEELA is you can start completely for free. You don't have to pay anything to start using this tool. So there's really no reason not to, especially when this is gonna be the most optimal way to prepare for the test. And then when you do start, you do get a discount code. Upile, do you have the code? I forget what the code is. But
Yeah, sure. I can circulate that ASAP. I can send one for all attendees.
yeah. So we'll give you guys all a discount code to get started on MEELA. And again, it's also completely free when you start, so there's no reason not to try it. And then you're also welcome to message me at this email. I believe that's the right email. Yeah. Cool. I'll stick around for a few minutes if anyone has any last minute questions, but I really encourage you to go try this yourself. Even if it's just doing like 2 or 3 questions on what we just practiced. That's a great way to get your SAT practice in for the day. Remember, 5 to 10 questions a day is the golden rule, and then obviously you want to be taking practice tests weekly to bi-weekly. Maybe spread them further out depending on your current situation. But yeah, I hope this was helpful for everyone. And yeah, you can always message me at teddy@trymeela.com. Access the product at trymeela.com. And yeah, thanks everyone. Feel free to ask any questions you have in the chat. And the link to MEELA is in the chat as well.
And you did it.